Hey everyone, it's Strange Michael. I hope you're doing well today. Of course, I have another review here for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series. I almost called it the Leatherface series. Mainly because part 3 here I'm about to talk about is called Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, or part 3. People call it different things. This cover here has always intrigued me, and just in case you don't know, if you haven't seen it in my previous couple of reviews, this is the first time I've ever seen this movie. I've watched pretty much every Texas Chainsaw Massacre film at least once or twice, and just never got around to this one. I used to see it all the time at Hollywood Video and Blockbuster and Movie Stars. I think was one of the ones we also had way back in the day that's been gone for like 10 years or 15 years. Anyway, we had a lot of old movie rental places, and I used to see this all the time and never got around to it. I couldn't tell if I had already seen it or if it was on TV ever. It came out in 1990, and it's 4 years after the previous film, Part 2, which I hate deeply. And the good thing about this movie, as goofy as it still is, they managed to still go back to being more serious like the original film, which Part 2 had completely abandoned to become a comedic parody. Now, Jeff Burr directed this. He also did Puppet Master 4 and 5. He did, what else did he do? I can't remember. Anyway, the film itself, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, is written by the guy who did The Crow, which I love The Crow. It's one of my favorite films of all time, probably my top 10 of all time, with Brandon Lee. So I have a lot riding on this film that I wanted to say good about it. And for the most part, I had a positive time with it. I do like it for the most part. It is much shorter, by like 20 minutes compared to Part 2, so it's about an hour and 25 minutes in total. Really about an hour and 20 if the credits are short the way they are. The film flies by. It really does. I like that darker tone that they went for again. It's not as dark and violent as the original movie. It's still kind of like in between as a 1980s, 1990s TV movie feel. It's got some good gore, nothing compared to Part 2, but it's got a couple of cool moments I enjoyed as well. There's a couple of cool things to talk about with this movie, even though I don't love it. I do like it more than Part 2, for sure, absolutely no question about that. But I will say this, it is flawed. It is flawed quite a bit. Mainly with the plot. The plot feels like it's a non-plot, for the most part. It feels like there's not really a whole lot happening in the story. And as I explain it to you, you're going to probably feel like I'm forgetting a lot of things, but honestly, I'm not. It's just a very dry movie. And again, it feels like a TV movie. The title, Leatherface, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, feels like a straight-to-video film. Also, my version here includes the R-rated and the unrated version. I watched the unrated version, but honestly, there's not more gore or anything from what I can tell. I didn't compare and contrast the two, but it feels like the unrated version to me feels like it's maybe a couple of minutes longer. I could be wrong. Maybe there's completely different things in the two versions. Maybe I'll do a separate review if I see some things online. I should have done some research before I did this video, but I didn't, so fuck you. But, I don't know. I don't know. I hope it's not a massive difference. Anyway, I watched the unrated cut. Like I said, I wasn't happy with it. It was just kind of mostly okay, mostly fine. It's above average to an extent, but it's just kind of fine when I'm really being honest with you. So what is this film about? Well, essentially you have... Does it sound like I'm excited? I'm okay. I'm okay. It's just okay, you know? Basically, there's a couple that I could have sworn were a brother and sister, but sometimes they feel like a couple, and sometimes they feel like a brother and sister, so I can't tell if they started out one way and then became the other. It's a little bit weird. It's all over the place, but they're kind of a couple, and they're traveling in one of their dad's cars, I guess, or something, to go drop it off. And as they're going through Texas and complaining about how hot it is, they happen to get through a certain area that has a lot of police officers digging up some bodies that they say were buried underneath some toxic waste, of all things. Apparently it's in the location the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1 and 2 happened, if I heard that right. Apparently that's where it was. And eventually they encounter Leatherface, who is now walking around looking better than Part 2, for sure, I will say that much. Not great, but better than Part 2. He's actually wearing like a real-looking, cool-looking skin mask, unlike Part 2. He's got like a leg brace on, which I guess is supposed to be a throwback to Part 1, but I think all of us are asking who have seen these movies, how the fuck did Leatherface survive Part 2, after what happened to him there? I don't know. Chop Top did not survive, which, again, it's a very cartoonish film. This is not, so it's a little weird that Leatherface survived and not Crop Top, or Chop Top. Crop Top? Is that what I call it? Jesus Christ. I meant Chop Top. But anyway, so there is no Chop Top in this film, but there are Chop Top-esque characters in this film. And I said plural. I mean plural. It wasn't a screw-up like I usually do. That was plural for a reason. There's a couple of characters that seem very much like him. And then there's like the wacky family, you know, type of redneck family type stuff. Like they have illnesses and diseases and that kind of thing. That is it's supposed to make you feel uncomfortable, and it does. So it does its job in that regard. Now that's really all I want to tell you about the plot. Aside from one more thing, there is a survivalist in the film who encounters this brother-sister couple that I keep referring to that's named Ken Foray. Yes, Ken Foray. You've seen him as, I think Big Joe Grizzly was his name, in Halloween's remake. He's a great actor. I've seen him in a lot of stuff, really like him. By the way, the director also did Stepfather 2. That's what it was. I just remembered that, too. I was looking at the list of all the things this director did before I got to the video, but that's what it was, Stepfather 2 that he did. So, the direction of the film, because I don't want to tell you much more about the story because there's really not much more story to tell, the survivalist aspect adds some cool elements to this. I really like Ken Foray as this character. He really kind of makes the film fun, in my opinion, because the brother-sister couple I keep referring to, they're not that great. They're not that watchable, not really that fun. The performances aren't bad, but I feel like everybody I've seen reviews for know the brother/boy. I don't know him from anything, as far as I know, so that's just me. But Ken Foray is great. I love watching him in here. And Leatherface is great. Every time he shows up, I really like him. I don't love the look of him. I love the look of him in the first film. I hate it in part 2, like I said. In this film, I like the look of him, but it's not amazingly great. It could be better, you know? But he's wearing like a tie, I believe is what I saw in the picture. But anyway, this film is not extremely gory or violent until later on in the film. The effects and stuff are not as good as part 2, but they are good, surprisingly. Like I said, for a 1990s film that came out 4 years after the sequel, after part 2, I mean, from 1986. This was surprisingly good. I wasn't expecting anything amazing, but I was looking forward to it. If I'm being honest with you, I really hoped this would be really good, because I knew what was coming after this, which is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Next Generation with Matthew McConaughey and Renee Zellweger, which is one of the worst films I've ever seen in my life, and I absolutely, deeply, deeply hate that shit. Outside of Matthew McConaughey's performance. And what they did to Leatherface in that film is even more insulting than what they did in part 2 with the guy. Outside of these things that I talked about so far in part 3, there's some other elements involving Leatherface that I do not like at all. I don't want to spoil those things, but I'm pretty certain about a couple of them. I could be wrong about a couple of them, but so I don't want to go into spoilers in case I'm wrong. There's a couple of things about this film that sway me away from him because of a couple of things I saw in here. But that's just me. That's just me. So again, I'm going to get away from all the plot stuff because there's really not much to tell you about. It's a short movie. There's really not a whole lot happening in it. It's your typical slasher subgenre movie for this kind of straight-to-video feel of this kind of thing. Anyway, the look of the film is kind of dry. It's kind of bland for the kind of budget they had, but it doesn't look bad. It looks good for what it is, you know, so I'm okay with that. Not a big deal. I've already talked about the practical effects. Let's talk about the music. Really the last thing we have in here. I thought the music was pretty good. It's not as good as part 2, obviously, but it's fairly decent. There was a couple of, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, it's been a few days since I watched this, but if I'm remembering correctly, I remember kind of a little bit of rock music, like almost like an 80s, early 90s sounding type of rock music. Not like a punk type of thing, but like that 90s music that still sounds like 80s music. That's what I heard in here, if I'm remembering correctly. Even though it's a darker film, it added to those scenes pretty well from what I remember. Outside of that, there's really not much. Not like an actual score or anything made for this film. That's really all I have to tell you. It's just kind of... it's just kind of whatever. Anyway, when it comes to Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 unrated cut, or unrated edition, whatever, I like it. It's definitely better than part 2. I do like it overall. I think it has some great moments in it, some really good stuff. By the way, there's also another actor in here you know from Lord of the Rings called Viggo Mortensen, I forgot to mention. He plays a role in here that's pretty important to the film. I do like him. He's very good. Good actor in general, but this is before Lord of the Rings. Like a few years before Lord of the Rings. I think Lord of the Rings was, what, 96, 97, 98, somewhere in there? He killed it in this. He was really good. One of the highlights of the film, one of the best parts of it. But anyway, oh, that's right, I forgot to mention that this couple here, brother-sister couple, they got to a gas station, got a gun pulled on them, and they were directed by Viggo Mortensen, who did not pull the gun on them, to go in this certain direction to get where they needed to go. That's how they ended up crossing paths with Leatherface. That was okay, I guess. Anyway, Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 is... It's It's got some misses, but it's got some really good stuff. It's very much a mixed bag, very much a mess, but still decent, still decently watchable. I don't know how often I would rewatch this. As a matter of fact, I haven't seen pretty much any of the series in like 6 or 7 years now, like I talked about. But I did enjoy going back to seeing this, you know, well, the series, but seeing this for the first time was interesting, to say the least. Anyway, did you love this film? Did you hate it? I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments down in the comment section down below. If I had to rate Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 on a 5-star basis, I'd give it a 3 out of 5 stars. It's very, right at kind of above average for me. I could see if it would be lower, and I could see on future rewatches this thing getting lower or higher. I'm not really sure, but I could see it definitely getting lower, because the surprises, the mystique, they're gone now. I know what I'm getting when I watch this now. Anyway, cool film with a cool poster, I like that. If there is a difference between the director's cut or the theatrical cut and the unrated cut, let me know what the differences are. I'll probably do some research. Like I said, I don't think there's any diehards that are out there watching this video. They're going to put all this factoid stuff in the comments, but, you know, I'd be interested. Anyway, what'd you think about the film? I'd love to hear what you have to say down in the comment section down below. Again, 3 out of 5 stars for me, for a film that I think improved on what Part 2 fucked up big time. Anyway, thank you all. God bless you guys. Goodbye.